So a lot of people ask about hiring, specifically when and how should I start building a team or hiring employees. If you're a freelancer, maybe this is irrelevant for you, you just want to be by yourself. But if you're trying to build an agency, then you actually need to start thinking about how and when you're going to build your team pretty early on. Michael Gerber wrote a book called The E-Myth Revisited, and I recommend every entrepreneur get it. Essentially, he talks about every business should have at least 3 people. They should have the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician. So the entrepreneur sets the visionary direction for where we're going as a company. The manager sets up the systems and processes to be able to help see that vision carried out. And the technician does the actual work to make sure that we're carrying out that vision. And so a lot of people start a business because they're a good technician or a tactician. They're good at design, they're good at web development, and that's the actual work they're doing. And then they start their own business, and now they have to learn how to think about vision and where I'm going as a business, and how do I set up the systems and processes to make sure that everything runs efficiently. And so when you start your business, even though you should have all 3 of those, typically all 3 of those people is just living inside of one person. And so you have to give even distribution of all 3 of those characteristics inside of you when you first start. So a lot of you guys are starting just by yourself, and that's totally fine. You need to think about those 3 aspects. But there's gonna come a point in time to where you're busy. Hopefully, if you're doing it right, you start getting clients, you start selling projects, and then you're gonna notice yourself starting to get overwhelmed. And now you're thinking, shoot, do I need to hire people? Should I work with freelancers by outsourcing? Should I build a team with other contractors, maybe in other areas? And those are all questions that you have to wrestle with. I could give you my perspective. When I started Butler, I started with an employee. I started with someone who can do the busy work, because I could do some design work, but I definitely knew that that was a weakness of mine. And so I had to hire my weakness. And that's one recommendation that I would give is be self-aware. Know what you're good at, know what you're weak at, and instead of trying to get better at what you're weak at, hire your weaknesses. And so in my case, I hired a designer developer, and I would focus on marketing, I would focus on sales, I would focus on strategy and onboarding clients. And so I started with an employee. Now, when I first started, I didn't have a ton of money. And so I found a local trade school who had a pool of students, and they were learning graphic design and web development. And one of the students, so actually a bunch of the students, they did interviews with local companies. I was a brand new company, and I reached out to them, and they sent over a few students to do internships. And so that's one way. A lot of people do unpaid internships. In this case, I did a paid internship, but you're not paying the same rate as you would a senior developer, because I just didn't have that kind of money. And so I hired a student who could take direction, and it just so happened that I lucked out. Now, I don't recommend that for everybody. I lucked out by hiring a really good employee. At that time, as a student at a local trade school. He's still with me to this day. He became our webmaster, but when he first was with us, he was a paid intern. And so I started with an employee, and then we started to sell more projects, and I was extremely busy, and we got to the point to where he was extremely busy, and I needed to hire another person. And so I hired another designer / developer, someone who could do graphic design as well as web development. It's gonna look different for every business, depending on what services you're actually rendering. For a lot of you guys, you're more talented than me, so where you can actually do a lot of the work yourself, and you might need to hire someone for accounting or for marketing. I think that as you're first starting out as an entrepreneur, you should not hire sales. That would go against what a lot of people would recommend. And the reason why I do recommend that is because nobody, in my opinion, is gonna love your business as much as you do, and you're gonna be the best salesperson. And so in my opinion, the CEO for the first few years is gonna be the primary person to do sales. So yeah, I started with an employee doing some of the technician work. But then there came a point in time to where another weakness of mine, I actually started growing in my design skills, and I was able to do some of the work, but a definite character flaw and weakness of mine is organization. I'm very scatterbrained, and this is really true for a lot of creatives. We just think too fast. We're moving faster than we've planned for, and that's definitely true of myself. And so I needed someone to help me put a lot of the pieces together and make sure that I was following through with my promises, especially if you're running with multiple projects at one time, you have multiple clients, you're taking customer service calls. It got way too overwhelming for me, and I needed to hire someone who can be more on the project management side and customer service. And so I hired someone to help me with that. It wasn't until 2016 to where I could actually start hiring people that actually went to school and had degrees for what I needed to hire them for. In the early days, I just had to hire interns and people just to get job experience and really walk alongside them because I didn't have the money to be able to afford them. And once you start making a little bit more money, you can invest in higher caliber of employees. And that's how we did it. A lot of people, they might make the decision to, instead of hiring employees, they might work with freelancers, or they'll outsource to someone maybe overseas. I have no problem with that. We've done a fair share of that. We have a consistent pool of people that have specialties that we don't have in-house, and maybe they have great portfolios on Instagram or wherever we might find them, and we'll contract specific types of work to them, but they're definitely not employees. These are freelancers that we'll call on for one-off type projects. If you're running an agency and you have multiple clients and you have a consistent amount of the same sort of work every month and every week, I don't recommend relying on just outsourcing to freelancers. You're really gonna have to think about hiring an employee. And so when do you hire? In the very beginning, it's probably just gonna be you, maybe one other person. You hire when you can afford it and when you need to. And so that's meaning like you don't want to drop balls. You want to make sure that you're fulfilling customer service, you're able to follow through on your promises, and you need people to do that. If you don't, you're just going to burn yourself out. And so you need to be thinking about hiring a team. And so you hire when you can afford it, you hire when you need to, and you also hire your weaknesses. And so, well, how do I hire? If you're going to be doing just one-off type projects, using freelancers, outsourcing to them is completely fine. If you're getting the same type of consistent work, I would definitely recommend having employees. And those employees don't have to be in-house. They can be in other places, but the difference is that they're dedicated to you. Their attention isn't on 50 of their own projects. They're really dedicated to just you. And it's gonna cost you more, it's gonna be more of an investment, but you're gonna get a lot more return for your investment.